Hi, and welcome back to my shop. Well, in my eagerness to get started on the joinery in this project, which is by far going to be the most challenging and interesting aspect of the project, I almost sort of overlooked a little factor in constructing this joinery. The back of the case needs to receive a rabbet all the way around because I'm going to do shiplapped pieces in the back, which will basically form the back of the case. And I need to actually cut those rabbets before I can actually start dovetailing in the dividers. Because I was really focused on the front dividers, which are going to get all the attention on the piece, but I have to have similar dividers that get dovetailed into the back as well, and that's what's going to hold the runners and kickers between the front and the back. So before I can go in and start cutting that joinery, I need to rabbet the back of my case. My rabbet is basically going to span half the width of this board, so that's going to be 5/16 of an inch. So I know that I'll have adequate stock, remaining on the outside. And in terms of the depth, I'm going to go with a 1/2 inch deep rabbet, and that'll allow me to use 1/2 inch thick stock to build the back piece. And I think 1/2 inch is good because it's not so thick that it's going to, make the back really bulky and heavy, but it's thick enough that I can actually do those shiplaps so that the boards will overlap. And so I've got my marking gauge set at exactly a 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to run it along the whole back of the case where that rabbet's going to go, and that's going to really serve two purposes. It's going to actually set a marking line for me so that when I cut the rabbets, I'll get a nice clean line. But secondly, it's going to serve as a reminder for me where these rabbets need to go, because the last thing I want to do is rabbet the wrong side or the wrong end. So it's also kind of a nice safety mechanism. And if you look at the way I have the joinery built here, I have no problem cutting a rabbet all the way to the end of the side pieces, but I will have to cut a stopped rabbet that will stop with still 5/16 of an inch remaining on the inside. So that'll be the only tricky part, is making sure that the top and bottom have a stopped rabbet. I've gone ahead and pulled the carcass apart, and this shows you where the mark I made reaches the end, and then basically, as I was describing, that stopped rabbet needs to stop 5/16 of an inch into that groove. Or 5/16 of an inch from that shoulder. Now it helps here that I do have that shoulder that I use to help me align the dovetails. I can just take my 5/16 inch setup block, put it right up against that shoulder, and just using my pencil, run a line. So I know exactly where I need that to stop. Now it doesn't have to be perfect because this is going to be hidden inside this half tail. But I don't want to go too far because I don't want to risk actually blowing out or splitting the edge of this tail. I've got my router table set up so that I'm taking a cut that's a 1/2 inch deep. I'm using a 1/2 inch blade, and I'll show you why in just a minute. And then it's 5/16 of an inch high. So I've gone ahead and already cut the rabbets on the side pieces. Those are the easier ones because they're through rabbets. So you can see I've already got that rabbet nice and hammered out. I did sort of determine, a lot of times if you're taking a bigger rabbet like this, it makes sense to sort of inch up on it and maybe cut, only half the rabbet and then raise the bit to cut the rest of it so that you are not putting too much of a load on your router. But in this case, I found that butternut is soft enough that I really don't have to do that. I can cut this rabbet in one pass. Now for doing the rabbets on the top and the bottom piece, this is where I have to do my stopped rabbet. Now you'll be able to see there's a very faint pencil mark that's exactly 5/16 of an inch in from the end of that tail. And I also have my fence set up so that the fence on either side is exactly set at the beginning and the end of the blade. And I can do that because I'm using a 1/2 inch blade to cut a 1/2 inch rabbet, and that accomplishes two things. One, I can set these to the exact same width of the blade because it's set all the way in. I don't have to worry about catching the melamine. You can see I've accidentally done that in the past, a little boo-boo there. And it also gives me sort of the most clean out at that stopped end so that I'll have the least amount of chisel work to do. If I were using a really big rabbet bit, I would have to have these separated more, so I would have to use some other mechanism for figuring out where the blade stopped and started, and I would have kind of a big sweeping curve at that stopped point, so I would have to do a lot more chisel work to clean it out. So what I'm going to do is come so that that pencil mark is extended just past where the white ends. I'm going to drop it down on the blade all the way, leaving a little bit of wiggle room there. I'll climb cut it back so I just get to that line. Climb cutting being, you know, moving this from left to right in the same direction as the blade motion. Once I get it right to that line, then I will cut normally the rest of the way through, and I'll just make sure to stop when this white line gets to my pencil mark on this side, and I'll have a nice stopped rabbet. And that's easier to do if I can do this all in one pass. And there you've got the nice stopped rabbet, and you can see it came just up to where my mark was, so that it won't take long to clean that out at all. And that was a pretty easy procedure to get a pretty substantial rabbet cut out. So now it's simply a matter of just defining the end of that stopped rabbet and just chiseling out the waist, and it's a pretty easy process. Just using a 3/4 inch chisel, and I really don't even need to use a mallet for this, because this chisel is really sharp, and this butternut cuts like butter. Now that I've reassembled the case, and you can see in the back corner here, the stopped rabbet meets just where the rabbet on the side ends up. So we've got a nice crisp corner there. It'll be really easy for me to put my shiplap boards in there, and that will represent the back of the case.